Hey everyone, Megan here with AMI Clubwear, and everyone has officially gone back to school, and that means you've probably either taken your first test or you're about to take your first test. So I'm going to give you some tips on test taking, but first let's talk about note taking. So if you haven't already picked your seats out in a class, or you have room to re-pick any seat you want every time you go to a class, definitely choose to sit in the front of the class. It tells your teacher that you're there to learn, and it's also less distracting to sit in the front of the class, because if you sit in the back, you're more likely to watch what other people are doing in the class, and you can't see as well and you can't hear as well. So always sit in the front of the class. They always say that the A students or the kids who usually get A's in that class are usually in the front, and it kind of goes from there. The B and C students are in the middle, and the F students are usually in the back. So choose to sit in the front. Also, when you're taking notes or you're in class, and if you have a question, ask the question. Chances are there are at least one or two other people in the class that have the same question, and they're just too afraid to ask. There's no such thing as a dumb question. It's your education, so ask the question. If somebody else thinks it was dumb of you to ask that, who cares? It's your education. Soak up all the knowledge you can and get what you need out of it to get your grades, because they're your grades, they're not somebody else's grades. Also, when you're taking notes, if the teacher writes it on the board, it's usually a key point, and you should probably write it down. One thing that I did in school in 8th grade actually was I got behind on taking notes for a specific test that we were going to be taking. It was a huge test, and so I relied on another girl's notes, and I started copying off of her notes. And when you take notes, you write down notes so that your brain can understand what you're talking about, and you write it so it's easier for you to remember, and so it makes sense to you. It doesn't hardly ever make sense to somebody else. So when you copy off somebody else's notes, you tend to get somebody else's interpretation of something, and it won't make sense to you, and it will completely make you blow a test. You will not know what the hell that person is talking about. So definitely take your own notes. Don't rely on other people's notes, because chances are you're not going to do well on the test. So you officially have that test coming up, and you need to study. The first thing that you need to do when studying is you need to space out your studying during the week. Don't wait until the night before your test to cram all that information in, because it's going to go in one ear and out the other, or in your eyes and out your, I don't know. But you're not going to remember the information. So space it out. Do at least a couple sessions, maybe 2 weeks before, maybe a week before, depending on how much time you have, and that your teacher lets you know that you have this test coming up. And space out your studying. Another tip that you want to use is never study in your bed or a place that's really comfy and cozy, because you'll be very inclined to nap. So I've actually made that mistake of studying in my bed. I'm thinking, oh, if I'm comfortable, I'm going to study longer, but it doesn't work at all, ever. Another thing that you should do when you're studying is taking short and frequent breaks, because your brain tends to retain more information if you go shorter periods of time while you're studying, versus if you study for like an hour long without taking any breaks. Your brain's not going to remember as much information. If you're using flashcards to help you study, you should always cut the corners off of your flashcards, because the corners distract your eyes. Subconsciously, your brain is constantly looking at those corners without you realizing it, and it distracts you from actually paying attention to the information that are on the flashcards. So round off your corners and make your flashcards round, and you'll tend to soak up more information that way. It'll be easier for you to remember. Another thing that you want to do is make up a fake test that is going to have some of the questions that are going to be on your test, and test yourself. And if you don't get it right the first time, just keep testing yourself the same questions until you finally remember that information, and it becomes a no-brainer. You know this information like you know your name. Also, you can make acronyms, i.e. never eat soggy waffles, north, east, south, west. You can make acronyms like that to help you remember information. Those are also really good things, because when you're making quirky little phrases, it really sticks in your brain and helps you remember things. Another tip that you don't necessarily have to use, but if you're one of those people who has to listen to music when you study or when you're doing anything, you should always listen to music that is either classical or music that doesn't have lyrics in it. If you are listening to a song that has lyrics, you tend to sing along with those lyrics, and it prevents you from studying and learning and whatnot. So listen to just easygoing music that you can block out of your head, stuff that you're not going to focus on. It's just kind of background music for you. Alright, so you're about to take that test and you're totally freaking the heck out. You definitely want to just take some deep breaths, you know? You got this. Remain positive, keep a positive attitude, keep telling yourself, I'm gonna pass this test. I know this information, I can do this. Don't ever tell yourself, I'm totally gonna fail this test, because chances are you're probably gonna fail the test. Don't put the thought in your brain that you're gonna fail. Stay positive, keep relaxed. If you're extremely stressed out, try exercising. Exercising is a really good way to relieve stress, and it releases endorphins, keeps you really happy and positive and motivated. Always get enough sleep. Don't ever go to bed really late the night before a test, because if you're really tired, you're not going to be fully alert and fully aware what's going on, and you might not read a question right. You know, you might get that question wrong just because you're tired. So get plenty of sleep. One of the best tips I can tell anyone when taking a test, I always use this tip when I was taking a test. If you have a math test or something where you have a lot of definitions, formulas, maybe you're taking a history test that has a lot of dates that you're trying to remember and you're afraid you're going to forget, as soon as you get your test, write down all that information on the side or on the back of the test. That way when you get to those questions that have that information, you can just refer right back to it. You don't have to worry about keeping it in your brain. So those are some really good tips for actually dealing with test anxiety and dealing with the stress of taking a test. So you got that test in front of you and you're going really good, everything's going well, and you finally get to that one question that you don't know. Don't freak out, just skip the question and come back to it later. Just do all the questions you know first and then come back and spend time on the questions that you don't know. Chances are, by the time you get to the end of it, you might remember that question, you might remember the answer. If it's a multiple choice question, you definitely want to read the whole entire question before you even look at the answers. And also, before you even look at the answers, try to come up with the answer in your head, and then if you see that answer on the choices, that's probably the answer. And also, when you're taking the multiple choice, your first instinct is usually the right answer. So go with your gut instinct on it, don't overthink it, just go with it. If it's a true-false question, qualifiers like never and always mean that the statement has to always be true, and these kinds of questions mean that it's usually false. So I hope these tips will help you with your test taking. Remember to comment, rate, and subscribe, and I'll see you girls next time. Bye!